Welcome into another edition of the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined as always on a Monday by Brian Perroni, here to break down Texas A&M and Ole Miss. A&M suffers their fourth straight loss, 31-28 defeat back at Kyle Field, but a lot to get to. Brian, how's everything been going?
Oh, good. Had a chance to go out on Friday night and see a couple big time junior quarterbacks with DJ Lagway and maybe McTwire and watch the A&M game. I mean, we'll talk about it. Not a win, but there's some things to like. And then saw the Astros get a win on Saturday night. So not a bad weekend at all. Obviously, you wanted A&M game to go differently, but there were some bright spots.
There was certainly some excitement to it, and Conner Weigman's right at the top of the list. Yeah, feel for you a little bit on Friday night having to go out to that Willis game. The weather was brutal. I obviously had a lot better night watching Denton Geyer the night before. Peyton Bowen obviously put on a show with a kick return, touchdown, interception, block kick, you name it. He was kind of in the middle of everything, but weather was all right for that one. It was just on Friday night with Willis. You guys sure didn't catch a break.
Yeah, it was the whole state. I mean, a lot of people moved games to Thursday. Some of them postponed them. So, I always do the stats on Friday night when I get home. So I started, I got home a little late. Willis is like an hour north. So got home and games were still going on in Dallas because they had been postponed. But it just was funny as I'm looking, I was like, man, all these quarterbacks had like 4 interceptions and 1 touchdown. Some teams like threw for 14 yards and ran for 400. So yeah, it just seemed everybody in the state had to sort of change and adjust. I know that my nephew plays for Houston Stratford. They had their rivalry game against Memorial. Memorial's a grinded out team. Stratford throws the ball
right up their alley.
Yeah, so they lost their rivalry game. But I'll tell you this: the way that the playoffs are, they play HIC in the first round and will be favored either way. And now they avoid Katy in the second round, so maybe it's not the worst thing.
Not the worst thing in the world. Those playoff matchups are right around the corner. Last week of the regular season basically coming up here, and there's still a lot of shuffling to be made. Some big games going on this week. I'll be out at hopefully Arlington Martin versus Arlington Bowie, and out to see Lovejoy as well. Peyton Pierce was in town this past weekend for Texas A&M and Ole Miss. Brian, diving into that game, obviously the story of the game and in the days after, A&M loses the game, but Conner Weigman has kind of been the talk the last couple of days. We sat on this podcast last week and made no bones about it that it felt like the time to get Conner Weigman in there. I'll be honest, I didn't expect him to play as well as he did. It was absolutely
you didn't predict 300 yards
no,
and
didn't predict
four touchdowns in his first ever start.
I thought he would be effective, but finishes with 338 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers, and sets a freshman record for passing yards in a game. Just all around really, really impressive and exceeded what anybody could have really hoped for.
Oh, no, for sure. Nobody really was predicting that kind of performance. And, I think all A&M fans were in the same boat that I was, and I assume you, and thinking, man, after those first 2 drives were incredible. A&M was able to run the ball with A-Chain. I mean, they were getting, around the edge, whatever, getting everything, ton. And then he had some great passes to Moose, to Evan Stewart. Just like, man, I was like, can't believe he's been sitting this long and hasn't played. I was like, I thought A&M was going to hang 70 on him. And then, little regression from, Weigman a bit, from the offensive line, from really everybody. I mean, A-Chain had over 100 yards early in the second quarter and, didn't really pour it on after that. But yeah, those drives, if you go back and look at that film, I mean, that was textbook, and that's what you could get from him. I would like to see him, I think they probably told him to stay in the pocket, throw the ball. He was making reads well. But, I mean, watching him in high school, he's a kid that, he wants to use his legs. I mean, nobody's Johnny Manziel. He's not going to be Johnny Manziel. But he's got sort of that same skill set, keep your eyes up, but also make people pay. And we saw with Jackson Dart, making A&M defense pay. I think that Weigman can do those same things. So once he gets more comfortable in the offense and is comfortable running, it's going to add another dimension.
No doubt. He's got another gear he's going to be able to kind of hit. And I wonder if some of that as well is that quarterback room is so banged up right now with everything going on there. You kind of need to keep Wigman upright and healthy. And I thought, the offensive line gave him time for the most part, had a better night overall, but obviously being back at home helps, not having as many false start penalties. They stayed on schedule, just everything you'd kind of been looking for clicked on those first two drives, and he was obviously perfect finding Moose Muhammad, finding Evan Stewart, who had another couple of just really, really, really impressive catches. The one-handed grab,
Oh
obviously for
yeah.
the touchdown, and then snagging another one off the helmet, just continues to impress and put up numbers. And I think the other thing that kind of impressed me was the patience that he had not to panic. Jimbo Fisher talked during his press conference on Monday. The touchdown pass to Devon Achane was his fourth read on the play. So to be able to come back around to your fourth read and hit him, just a really good job overall. And outside of the one throw in the back of the end zone, and you could tell when as soon as he did it, kind of sensed that was a ball he had put in danger.
Yeah.
Really didn't put a whole lot of balls in danger. He kind of put his hands on top of his head. You could tell
Yeah. I was
even
like, yeah,
later
he
when
like turned around like, oh, there's an interception. And
there it comes.
yeah.
For the other outside of that, really for the most part, didn't really put the ball in danger, put the ball in the right spots. And one thing I liked about this offense, and Jimbo Fisher maintained that it kind of took place throughout the entire game, but the tempo and the crispness at which A&M played with was something I particularly liked on those first two drives. Obviously, there's going to be things to clean up. The two sacks at the end of the first half that probably took points off the board for A&M are a learning moment and a growing moment. But outside of that, got the ball to the playmakers and we on the running game side, you mentioned it. Devon Achane finishes with 25 carries for 138 yards and had 41 yards receiving as well. He was really, really good in that first half.
He was. I mean, yeah, just the offensive line was blocking well. I mean, it just looked like a completely different team than we saw, at South Carolina or, more so like Mississippi State, where they just, were playing in mud. It seemed like so.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to like. You're talking about A-Chain. He's not the biggest back. I mean, do you
Yeah.
want him necessarily getting the 25 carries? You had said today during the press conference, somebody asked if he was going to get more. It's like,
Yeah.
no, he doesn't need more. They need a second back.
They
I
do.
had at one point in the fourth quarter, A-Chain had 107% of the team's rushing yards because he had every carry but one. Le'Veon Moss had one carry for no yards, and then at that time, Wigman had been sacked, so he had negative yards. So A-Chain actually had 107% of the offense, and every time he ran, his percentage of the offense actually went down, which that's maths for you. Who knows?
Yep.
But that can't happen. You got to get somebody. Whether it's Amari Daniels is back this week, whether it's Le'Veon Moss, whoever it is, LJ
LJ
Johnson, if he's
Johnson.
going to
Yeah.
play, you got to trust somebody to be a change of pace because somebody's got to run through the middle, and big sort of bruiser back. And we saw that with Ole Miss. I mean, they used now they're sort of similar backs, but they used Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans, and both guys were making A&M pay. And then you had Jackson Dart, and just three guys just wearing out the A&M defense, and A&M needs that on offense.
And whether he was or wasn't, Shane looked pretty tired in the fourth quarter, and rightfully so, having to just be the bell cow the entire game. And yeah, the question Jimbo Fisher was asked was about whether there needs to be more handoffs in the RPO situation, and whether even if they're bringing an extra man into the box, are there times when you just hand the ball off to make sure that Devon Achane's touching the ball? And Jimbo Fisher said, "Look, you got to trust your reads on RPOs, and you're gonna spin yourself into a web if you're constantly trying to just give man to force feed the ball to a chain, even if that's not the play. Otherwise, you just got to call run calls and go with it. But yeah, that was the big thing that I came out of the game was that you have to have somebody else develop, and it's not like those guys haven't made it's not like Le'Veon Moss has made a big mistake at any point. He just hasn't got a ton of carries. And even if it's a
I think he's
series
had
here,
4 on the year,
he's
or
had 4 a
5
year.
maybe.
It's not like he's
Yeah.
had a massive mistake where you're wondering whether you can go back to him. You have to be able to spell that chain and keep him going for the entire game. I mean, it's one of those things where they just need somebody else, whether it's Le'Veon Moss, whether it's LJ Johnson or Amari Daniels, to step forward and be able to take sort of that second load. We talked about this all during the preseason about how deep this running back room was, of guys kind of waiting to step forward and guys waiting to push forward, and there just hasn't been that second guy that has kind of emerged. And they're kind of waiting on it. One note on a young player I think that is starting to step forward is Donovan Green. We're starting to see him make more and more plays in the passing game. Now, Jimbo Fisher did talk today, and there'd been a question after the game and in the press conference about why Blake Smith.
A lot of fans had the same question.
On why Blake Smith was out there on the final drive when hasn't got a ton of playing time to this point. Donovan Green was banged up, and so Jimbo Fisher said they went with Blake Smith because he had been especially effective in the red zone in practice on Thursday. I think he said he had at one point he said he had 5 catches.
2-minute drill. 2-minute drill.
2-minute drill. 2-minute drill.
Yeah.
At one point said he had 5 catches, and one point said he had 6. So take it for what he were. Maybe there was a catch in between there that we don't know about, but either way, he had been especially effective, so they trusted him in kind of that situation. So that was why he was out there. But certainly encouraging what we've continued to see from Donovan Green these past couple of weeks.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, Donovan, he came in. I mean, it's just interesting, for everybody who follows recruiting. Green was A&M's, not just A&M's main target, A&M's only target in the class. And they said, hey, we're not offering anybody else. We want you. And then he ended up committing. Then they took Theo Orstrom, who was supposed to be 24, reclassified. And then on signing day, the Johnson brothers wanted in. They're like, well, it's hard to turn down the top player at his position, But, even after camp, we thought that Jake Johnson was going to be the true freshman who's going to have all these reps. I know he's been hurt, but thinking if it wasn't him, then it's going to, it was Max Wright would get the job and all that. Even with Donovan being the main guy, I don't think anybody expected him to be the guy just yet. But yeah, he's really come on as the season's gone on. He's one of the starters, and yeah, he's been good. And then Noah Thomas got himself
first touchdown.
I think it might have been his first catch, or am I wrong about that?
I think first catch, first touchdown, not a bad way to get into the game as well.
Yeah, so I mean I mean, when you have the number 1 class in the country and of all time, I mean, your freshmen are going to play early, but with all the injuries and everything else, I mean, they are really being, counted on. Bryce Anderson had another big game, and I think we'll talk a little more about him later. He was badly injured in the second half, but valiantly went to the ground.
Valiantly came up.
And fought it off
Lane
to get
Kiffin's
out.
dismay.
Yeah. As soon as, if you're watching on TV, as soon as he got to the sideline, he asked whoever, I may have been Dirk, and I don't know who he was on the sideline, like, hey, can I go back in? It's like, no, you have to sit out of play. It's the rules. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, he played well. You just have all these young guys, and this year was not supposed to be a write-off. It was not supposed to be a rebuilding year, but that's what it is at this point. So you got to look at it through those lenses and say, hey, there's a lot to like. Like, yeah, it's not ideal. There's a chance they may miss a bowl, which is embarrassing for a team that started out number 6 in the country. I mean, that's embarrassing. I was actually just looking at somebody had a screenshot of who was it? Who's on game day? The first guy, Desmond Howard.
Oh, Desmond Howard, yeah.
Yeah, so they showed
he had the national championship
prediction. His national championship, his playoff picks had A&M, Baylor, and Michigan State were 3
kiss of death right now.
Playoff picks. So,
you know what?
He turned out to
he went bold. He went bold on this one, and it was a swing and miss, to say the least, on those ones. But hey, fortune favors the brave sometimes, and sometimes you got to swing big. But we'll certainly get into Lane Kiffin a lot more, and there were a lot of positives from this game. There was obviously one big downside was A&M's run defense in this game was just horrendous. 390 yards they gave up. Quinton Judkins was a killer all night and he had a career high over 200 yards rushing. And for me, some of those runs were just at back-breaking times. Like a good example was as A&M had just pulled back to 24-21, and then Judkins breaks off that 60-plus yard run, finishes it off a couple plays later with another touchdown, and suddenly you're back in a deep hole. And that was just, to me, just kind of a killer. And Jimbo Fisher talked about it today that, one, they got to tackle better, they got to be able to stay in lanes better, got to when it comes to pass rushing, they've got to be able to stay in their pass rushing lanes better. Just a lot that they've got to get corrected, because got news for you. Anthony Richardson's coming in next, and is another guy that will make you pay with your legs and run all over you. So that, to me, is a pressing issue that needs to get cleaned up in a hurry. Potentially getting back Antonio Johnson and Edgerrin Cooper more full go. Jimbo Fisher mentioned, he did play a little bit against Ole Miss, but to get him back full go would be big. And just they've got to get that cleaned up this week.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah, as good as Judkins and Zach Evans were in that game, I think the toughest and most backbreaking runs were really on Jackson Dart, whether design runs or scrambles. And it wasn't, what did, I got it pulled up here. He finished with, 95 yards rushing. He had over 100, but they took the sacks obviously out of there.
Yep.
So, you shouldn't do that to a QB, especially one who's not a running guy. But also, it was when A&M had him at like 3rd and 11 or things like that. It's like they've stopped him 2 plays. You got him, you got him behind the chains and
exactly where you want him.
He runs for 15 yards, and it's like, and so he did that a lot. And so they, like you mentioned, Anthony Richardson. Okay, he had a touchdown against Georgia and no interceptions. So now he's even in the touchdown and interception column. Yeah. He's at like 53% passing. Just not for a guy that started the year with Heisman talk and with talk of being an early first round.
That was
pick.
Probably a little premature.
Yeah,
too.
No, for sure. And he has fallen back to earth in a major way, but he also can make you pay with his legs. And A&M is really going to have to key on him. Now, Florida's run game as a whole is not as good as Ole Miss. So, they will be able to focus more on Richardson, because you don't have Zach Evans and Quinton Judkins, coming out there with them. But it's something they have to get fixed for sure. And what is the fix? I don't know. Maybe play a 5-man front rather than 3. Do something. Just throw people up there.
No doubt. And it's just one of those things. They got to be more disciplined. Whether it's when you're in the pass rushing lanes, you got to be more disciplined, and you can't over pursue and leave some of those gaps open. If you're running twist games, you got to be able to stay in your holes and stay disciplined. To me, that's what it comes down to when you're playing when you're playing young players, though. You're going to have things like this happen. And Jimbo Fisher mentioned it was kind of a variety of things. They had spies on the quarterback. All of a sudden the spy takes his eyes off the quarterback, which is, definitely not what you're supposed to do. All of a sudden now you're giving up a big gain to Jackson Dart. So it comes down to the details, and but overall, I think there's a lot of good to take away. A&M's just not quite over that hump yet, and we're gonna look ahead to a little more ahead to next week, and talk about one more thing coming out of the game, coming out of a quick break. Welcome back into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni. Brian, there was a lot of talking in this game, not just between the players either, between coaches.
I don't even know how much there was with the players. I think it was mainly just mainly that coaching staff on the other sideline.
Mainly that coaching staff, Lane Kiffin, certainly made his feelings known both during the game. You mentioned the Bryce Anderson play. That was one where he was jawing back and forth with Bryce Anderson, was jawing back and forth with Damani Richardson as well. Had some things to say. There's videos out there for folks to certainly go look at what he said.
What
But
did he say, Andrew? What did he
certain
say? No, I'm just messing with you.
certain things that
It's a
can't be said on
family-friendly podcast,
yeah,
okay?
certain things that can't be said on a YouTube channel. We might be hearing from YouTube about that, but and it remains to be seen if a certain somebody we hearing from the league as well. Jimbo Fisher left it there during his podcast or during his press conference on Monday. Said he will leave what Lane Kiffin had to say and talking to his players to the SEC. But this back and forth with Lane Kiffin and A&M and the players, just what did you make of it?
Okay, man. Kiffin, he's just tries to be entertaining. Most of the stuff is
Yeah,
just because he thinks it's funny. Now we'll go back like the Bryce Anderson deal when he, is saying like "f you" whatever to Bryce Anderson, because he thinks Anderson was faking an injury to slow him down. Do you know how many clips are out there of Ole Miss players? There's one,
yeah.
I mean, that
There's one of
somebody
him
responded to the league
saying,
with.
"Get down,
Yeah,
get
that he's
down."
actually just yelling at his players just running off the field like normal. And he's saying, yelling at him to get down. Like, I mean, come on, dude. Like, you cannot get mad if like you are specifically known for that. But most of what he does is just trying to be entertaining, but he tries too hard. Like,
He does.
just the whole like clown deal. And today he tweeted something with like clown emojis, but it was a link to an article that made no sense. It's like, the reason Lane Kiffin was talking trash to Jimbo Fisher was because Jimbo talked trash to Nick Saban. Like, what? That
Yeah,
makes zero sense. And then also Saban was the one who started that whole thing,
yeah.
with his comments to the Booster Association about A&M buying their whole team. So, I mean, Lane Kiffin is just trying to make himself, more relevant there and jump into that discussion. And it's like he just thinks it's funny. And if I was an Ole Miss fan, like, yeah, I mean, be like, hey,
It'd
that's
probably be
cool, coach,
entertaining.
funny.
Yeah,
But at some point, you're just like, dude, like, it's like, stop trying so hard. Also, you're probably gonna get calls from Sankey, today. I'm guessing probably already has. Jimbo maybe already got one, because he had to come in this summer and get on both Saban and Jimbo behind the scenes. So yeah, he's not gonna like be for all the coaches taking pot shots at each other.
no doubt. And Jimbo obviously showed a lot of restraint today. Said, "I will leave all that to the SEC and to the league to handle that," and then kind of threw in one comment at the end and said, "Amazing," just as kind of a
Yeah,
final
because
a final shot. But the other thing, to your point, not even going back further than Nick Saban making those comments over the summer. It was actually Lane Kiffin on February 1st that said, and I quote, "I joked if I didn't know if Texas A&M incurred a luxury tax with how much they paid for their signing class." That was Lane Kiffin on February 1st.
yeah,
Jimbo Fisher then responded on National Signing Day, and obviously that kind of went over to the summer as well. So to act like he just didn't say anything and
I
is
know.
absolved of
Yeah,
all blame and everything going on, to me is kind of the comical part when you were the guy that came out, and not just Texas A&M. I think Texas was in there as well, as he talked about the luxury tax as well. Clearly, we all know where he was going with that, and so to make that comment and then kind of talk after the game Saturday about how he took it personal that he got called a clown, and how Nick Saban got called, how Jimbo Fisher went after Nick Saban. Well, you were
I
right
don't
in the
think
middle of
Lane
it
Kiffin
because
cares about Nick Saban's
I
feelings.
don't
Like,
think
you
so. I
think
don't.
they like hanging out like on weekends and eating ice cream and watching rom coms
Yeah,
together? No, he doesn't care about Saban's
no.
feelings. Get out of here.
And in 2 weeks, he's going to have it circled on his calendar to want to beat Nick Saban as well, and is going to have that as a landmark game to circled. So he's not going to care about Nick Saban's feelings
Oh yeah, we're gonna
after
hear
this
probably
weekend's
Saban
done.
too.
We're
Yeah,
going to
he's
hear
gonna trash talk
something in a
Saban
couple
too
days.
that week.
Yep, absolutely, and it's just what he does, and I get it. Like you said, as an Ole Miss fan, it's probably entertaining and probably fun, but don't play the victim card and all that sort of stuff when you were right in the middle And I certainly agree about all the injury stuff. We talked about it. It was clear as day. You could see there was blood on Bryce Anderson's socks as well, and so not to mention that part as well. And you know, it was really funny to watch that whole exchange and see it all play out.
Oh no, for sure. And I mean, he's talking about A&M's costs. I mean, Ole Miss, look at all the dudes they took from the transfer portal. Like
Yep.
they got a lot. And so if you're like, just chill out, man. Just go out there and coach. Like that's, if he wants to be an Ole Miss lifer, and he very well may,
Yeah.
then yeah, do that. But if you are, that's going to look bad whenever, if you're looking at potential other jobs, that's going to be like, do we want to deal
Do
with
we
that?
want to deal with that?
Deal with
Yeah.
that headache? Because if he's like that in public, imagine in private. I mean, who knows? I don't know Lane Kiffin. I never met Lane Kiffin, but it's like there's just no reason. Like, yeah, you entertained your fan base. Good job, but they're already entertained anyway. You're in the top 15. Shouldn't be, but you're in the top 15. So,
Yeah. And coming out of that game, the kind of my final thought is if you're an Ole Miss player, I'm sure they find it entertaining as well. But that team's sitting at 8-1 now. Shouldn't that be kind of the conversation coming out of this game? You're sitting at 8-1 with Alabama coming up in 2 weeks, kind of right probably where they wanted to be sitting. Instead, all the talk is about the clown talk and all that sort of stuff, and that's where everything's kind of sitting. And so for me, I just kind of chuckle at it, and I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's any sort of call from Greg Sankey to Lane Kiffin saying, chill out as well, just like I told Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher in the summer. And both sides are gonna kind of turn the page now. And we mentioned Texas A&M turns the page to Florida. And there's still a chance. You talk about bowl eligibility. Jimbo Fisher talked about it today. That's one of their main goals. And A&M now, the margin gets thinner on looking at the rest of the season. They've got games left against Florida, against Auburn on the road, who just fired their coach, UMass, and LSU. A&M needs to win 3 of them, and I think the next 3 weeks, frankly, are a huge opportunity.
They're going to be favored. They're going to be favored in all 3 of the next ones, and they get LSU at Kyle Field, so that's nice too. I mean, LSU's playing really well, so that's going to be tough. But I mean, God, it's just crazy though. Like at the beginning of the year, I did not think we'd be talking about bowl eligibility. I mean, we did a podcast about best and worst case scenarios, and I never said 5 and 7. We're talking about 10 and 2 if things go, or 9 and 3 if they go really bad. So, this is just crazy. But
we talked about, I kind of said during that podcast that 8-4 kind of felt like the floor with this team having another year with some of the offensive line issues kind of shored up, looking at Bryce Foster, Ruben Fothery, and Layden Robinson. And it hasn't played that way. The plus hasn't played out that way along the offensive line. They've not played up to par most of the year. But I do think if you're looking at these next couple of games and what A&M has at least shown coming off the bye week or since that Alabama game, played well against Alabama, came up a play short along the goal line from beating Alabama, put yourself in just a terrible mess in South Carolina with that stadium rocking. But actually, after falling behind 17-0, don't play too badly, and then fall one drive short against Ole Miss. It's frustrating for fans. It's frustrating for the coaches. It's frustrating for the players. They've just got to be able to find a way to get over the hump and be able to generate some momentum in this back half of the year. Florida is gettable. They really are. They're kind of struggling to begin SEC play as well. We talked about Auburn. They've certainly been a mess, to say the least, this year. And UMass is one of the worst teams in the FBS. So, the opportunity is still there ahead of them, but it's got to, at some point really, really soon, start resulting in wins.
No, for sure. And yeah, this is like the back half of the schedule. A&M has always had a ridiculously tough back half, but this year it's the opposite. Now LSU is really good. Well, when they want to be, sometimes they're not. But yeah, these 3 games in a row are just all, Florida and Auburn are sort of same as like A&M. Auburn is I mean, their lone SEC win was against Missouri, and they shouldn't have won. It was that where it went in overtime, and Missouri on the first play went
It's
24 and
disaster.
3/4 yards, and the guy fumbled it barely into the end zone, so they lost. But they were outplayed by Missouri, and so that and that's their only win. And their other two wins, one was against an FCS program. So I mean, you like yeah, the
You have to
Auburn,
be able
you
to.
always want to play for a new coach, but yeah, that's a must win no matter what. I mean, but for when you're talking to the bowl, so then it just so this weekend, I mean, Florida's like sort of must win. I mean, A&M has to go to a bowl. I know this nobody's, people are
Yeah,
checked out on the season and all that, but you just can't have a year where you go 5-7. That's just
you can't. It's going to be a
not
killer.
okay. Yeah, that's not okay. Because you got 4 non-conference games, which all of them this year should have been easy wins, but you got the oh no, Miami shouldn't have been an easy win. They got to win, but then App State. But
And
you have
even
four, so
Miami this year has
I know.
been
Oh gosh, I don't know if anybody watched that. Oh, that was glorious. A 4 overtime game that finished 14-12. Amazing. I watched the end of that one. That was awesome. But yeah, Miami's been bad. So, but yeah, you have 4 of that. So then you just got to win 2 in conference. It's like,
yeah.
okay, you're playing South Carolina. You beat 8 times and never lost to. And yeah, so they need that. And then that also gives you more practice. And, let's say it's the Texas Bowl, which seems pretty likely at this point. I saw CBS project them the Birmingham Bowl against either Georgia Southern or Georgia State. I think those are the same schools, so I never bother to learn the difference. But I was like, if they play in Birmingham, I don't know how many fans are going to be at that one.
Yeah.
I think the SEC will send it to Houston because they try to like keep A&M out of Houston because it's like too easy. But I think this would be the year to send them to Houston, play like Baylor, maybe OU. I mean, but so give fans something to see and recruits be able to see him in action one more time. So you really need that bowl game. I mean, even though all the good players don't even play in bowls, but which means some of the younger guys get to play.
Well, you look at a guy like Conner Weigman, right? If you're building for next year and you're building for 2 years from now, that's an opportunity for him to get 13 more practices, to get freshmen some opportunities, and get him, get him more game experience. And so that's certainly something to play for. Jimbo Fisher talked about it today, that's one of their key goals to begin the year is getting to a bowl. So it's something that he said they've got to be able to do. And you're right. You just can't miss a bowl, especially with these expectations. You can, to me, this season's going to fall short of expectations regardless of what happens. If you can get to 6-6, maybe you finish with a win in a bowl game, go into the offseason, make some of those changes that you feel like are necessary, and go into next year knowing and feeling confident about who your quarterback's going to be and having that down, you can survive this season and move on positively. But if you miss a bowl and miss those 13 practices, that just gives you another hurdle that you have to try to cross and recruit your own roster back and fight that narrative. So just a really important couple of weeks. I know the fans are going to be disappointed about the direction this is going, but certainly just need to finish off the right way. So that'll do it for this week. We'll be back later in the week to preview that Florida game and look ahead to this coming weekend. But for the now, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. As always, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports YouTube page to get a notification every time a new video drops. Until then, we'll see you guys soon.